Welcome back. Part 2 of our massive story. Black Waitress calls the Mafia boss to return his lost wallet, unaware it was a test. If you missed Part 1, where Serena Johnson picked up the wrong wallet and stepped into Alejandro Cruz's dangerous world, the link is in the description below. Now let's see what happens when the cartel boss calls on her again. This time, not for honesty, but for loyalty. Serena proved herself once before when she saved Alejandro's trusted confidant. But the real test. It's only just beginning. The plane dipped through gray morning clouds and slid over a city that looked endless. Mexico City stretched in every direction. Blocks of color, ribbons of traffic, a living engine. Serena pressed her forehead to the window for one quiet second. New world. New rules. No exit sign. The jet door opened. Heat rushed in, heavy and dry, carrying jet fuel and the bite of altitude. Two men in dark suits waited at the bottom of the stairs. No airline logos, no smiles. They checked her face, her passport, her silence. One lifted a hand. She followed. No baggage claim. No lines. A side door. A private corridor. Serena's sneakers thudded on polished tile as the men moved with quiet certainty. The flip phone in her pocket felt like a small, sleeping animal. She kept her hand off it. She already knew who owned it. Outside, a convoy waited. Two SUVs in front, one behind. Black glass. Low engines. The rear door swung open before she reached it. Serena climbed in and pulled the door shut, her breath catching as the city air faded behind armored glass. The vehicle smelled faintly of leather and cologne. She kept her shoulders square and her eyes forward. The convoy rolled into traffic and the city swallowed them. Everywhere she looked there was motion. Buses coughing smoke, street vendors lifting metal shutters, kids in uniforms racing sidewalks, a woman selling flowers in a blur of red, yellow, white. Serena wanted to press her palm to the window, to feel something human and ordinary. She didn't. Her reflection looked back at her, a young woman in simple clothes with a ring of hard truth in her eyes. No one in the car spoke. The driver wore an earpiece. The man in the passenger seat watched mirrors. Serena kept count of the turns until she lost the thread. When the convoy left the main roads, buildings thinned to high walls, tight gates, bougainvillea spilling purple over stone. The SUVs angled into a long tree-lined lane and stopped at a steel gate painted the color of calm. Cameras turned. A panel slid. The gate opened. Inside was quiet money. Gravel set like silk under the tires. Shade trees. A broad house with white walls and dark wood, wide steps, glass that reflected sky. Guards stood in the distance as if they were part of the landscape. No uniforms. No flashes of weapons. Just stillness that said, nothing happens here by accident. The SUV door clicked. Serena stepped out. Air smelled like cut grass and something citrus. A woman in gray opened the front door and bowed her head slightly. Serena crossed the threshold. Cool stone floors. A wide hall. Paintings with more space than paint. The house was soft underfoot and hard at the edges. Every corner had a camera disguised as a bowl or a light. Every window looked peaceful and watched. She knew a cage when she saw one. Even a beautiful one. Footsteps. She turned. Alejandro Cruz walked toward her with the same calm weight he carried in Houston. No suit this time. Dark shirt, sleeves rolled. He looked like a man used to decisions. He stopped a few feet away, eyes moving over her face as if checking for cracks. "Welcome," he said. Serena heard the word and understood the message behind it. Welcome to protection. Welcome to control. Welcome to me. He motioned and she followed him down the hall. A door opened to a bright room arranged for a life that had been packed and shipped without asking. Her textbooks lined a shelf. Her notes sat in clear trays. The framed photo of her grandmother, Gloria's steady eyes, stood on a desk. Her favorite mug. Her sweater. Things that smelled like Houston. Things that said, "We touched your life while you were asleep." Her throat tightened. "You moved my apartment." "I moved your belongings," he said, even not unkind. "Your apartment was not secure." "Wasn't your call," she said before she could stop herself. He held her gaze. Everything involving you is my call. The words were not loud. They didn't need to be. Serena looked at the textbooks and saw the invisible signatures on the spines. Paid by him. Moved by him. Approved by him. She felt a small flare of anger, clean and bright, like a match in wind. "What is this place?" she asked. "A house," he said. "A compound, if you prefer. It keeps what I care about alive." "And a prison," she said softly. He didn't flinch. Protection and imprisonment often share a fence. She walked to the window. Sun burned through thin clouds. Beyond the glass, a gardener trimmed hedges with slow, exact movements. Beyond him, a high wall ran the length of the property. Beyond that, another wall. The world was very close and very far. "What happens to school?" she asked without looking back. "You will finish," he said. "Remotely for now. Exams arranged. Professors compensated for their time." "Compensated," she repeated, the word tasting like metal. His tone didn't change. "You will become the doctor you wanted to be. You will become it faster. With resources. With power. Without debt. Owned," she said. "Protected," he said. They stood in the space between those two words. A life could live there, but not a free one. He showed her more of the house. A kitchen that smelled like cumin and roasted peppers, a courtyard with a stone fountain and shy birds, a corridor that led down to a door with a keypad and a guard standing like a pillar. She didn't ask. She already knew. The clinic without a name. They returned to the main hall. A staffer in gray placed a small tray on a console table. Tea, lime, a dish with sugar. Serena's hands were steady when she lifted the cup. Her breath was not. "What do you want from me here?" she asked. "The same as Houston," he said. "Skill. Silence. Presence when called. And if I say no?" He studied her face as if the answer were written there. "You won't. And if I do, I will protect you anyway," he said. "But your life will be smaller. And shorter." There it was. Not theater. Not threat. Weather. She set the cup down gently so it would not rattle. "Why me?" she asked, not for the first time. "Because when no one was watching, you did the hard thing," he said. "And when everyone was watching, you did the right thing. I can build on that." She thought of the bus terminal cafe. The greasy phone. The envelope she never spent. The ranch and the way his hands didn't shake. The warehouse and the way hers finally did. She thought of Gloria's photo on the desk behind her, eyes that had always told the truth. Sometimes survival is not a clean story. A door opened somewhere deep in the house. A guard's footsteps crossed tile, then faded. Serena found her voice. "My life as a student." She stopped, swallowed. Tried again. "It's gone, isn't it?" "It has changed," he said. "Into what?" "Into what you make of it," he said. "Inside the lines that keep you breathing." He stepped closer, not to crowd, but to be sure she heard. His voice lowered, steady as a metronome. "Your future begins here," Alejandro said. "You will choose whether to survive it." The sun slid behind Mexico City like a coin dropping into a dark well. By the time the house lit up, the compound felt like a small country with its own weather, its own laws. Staff moved quietly through the halls. Doors opened and closed without sound. A long table was set in the inner courtyard beneath string lights and a single stone arch. The air smelled of lime, grilled meat, wood smoke, and something floral that arrived in brief, soft waves. Serena stood at the threshold for a breath, steadying herself. She wore a simple black dress that someone had laid out on her bed with a note that only said, "Dinner, 8 p.m." Her hair was pulled back. No jewelry. No ring. The flip phone sat on her nightstand like a sleeping threat. She left it there. Alejandro was already seated at the head of the table. He didn't wear a suit. He didn't need one. A charcoal jacket. Open. A white shirt with the collar unbuttoned. He gestured to the chair at his right as if he had never imagined her anywhere else. Serena sat, spine straight, hands folded in her lap until the staff poured water and set down small plates. She lifted the glass, grateful for something to hold. The guests arrived in twos and threes, like weather fronts rolling in. Men in well-cut jackets. A woman in a pale suit with a steel pin at her lapel. Faces built from years of getting their way. Voices that stayed low even when they laughed. Names drifted across the table like cards. Ibarra, Velasco, Sosa, La Madrina. Guards lingered at the edges, just shadows with eyes. If the room was a circle, Alejandro was the center point. People placed their sentences around him. Their glances checked his. Serena felt it in the way the table moved, the way the conversation never quite slipped from his hand. When they noticed her, really noticed, something changed. Silence didn't fall, but it bent, as if sound had to step around a new object. Said the man with gray at his temples and a smile he didn't mean. Ibarra. The doctor. Serena matched his gaze. I'm a student, she said. But I keep people alive. A soft laugh from the far side. Velasco lifted a glass. You kept someone alive, he said. Singular. We were told. Useful is good. Temporary can be managed. La Madrina, the woman with the steel pin, cut in gently. She sits at his right hand, she said, nodding toward Alejandro. Temporary rarely sits there. The plates arrived. Grilled fish with charred lemons, warm tortillas, bowls of salsa that gleamed like jewels. Staff served like a dance. In, out, without ever being seen. The guests began to eat. The room loosened by a visible inch. So, Sosa said, looking down the table with pleasant malice. What do we call you? Doctora. Or does the title still belong to the dream? Serena, she said, calm. Serena, he repeated, tasting the name like wine. Tell me, do you know where you are? This is not a church. This is not a clinic. This table is not a jury. It is a scale. Serena held his eyes. Then weigh me, she said. A few low laughs. Alejandro said nothing. He didn't save her. He didn't warn them off. He watched. Sosa's smile widened. Weigh you? Very well. You are young. You are American. You were a waitress. And now, he spread a hand toward the courtyard, the guards, the heavy air. You sit in a place people kill for. Why? Serena took a sip of water. She could feel her grandmother in the breath she took next. Simple. Clear. True. Because when someone was bleeding out, I didn't freeze, she said. Because when I should have looked away, I looked closer. Because I don't need a suit or a title to stop a person from dying. And because he, she inclined her head toward Alejandro, asked me to stay. A beat. Another. She didn't blink. Ibarra leaned in, amused. Asked. Our friend has not asked anyone for anything in a very long time. Serena didn't smile. Then he told me to stay, she said. Either way, I'm here. I do my work. I don't talk out of turn. I don't spend what isn't mine. And I don't forget who bled on my hands. The table went quieter than the courtyard should allow. A fork clicked once against china and then stopped. In the corner of her eye, Serena saw Alejandro's profile tilt by a degree, as if he'd heard a better song in a familiar room. Velasco raised his glass again, slower now. You speak like someone who thinks words can be stitched as neatly as skin, he said. Be careful. Language scars worse. La Madrina waved him off. Her answer is clean, she said. Better than half the men who have sat here and promised the moon. She did not promise anything. She stated facts. Sosa wasn't done. He leaned back in his chair and let his gaze slide over Serena like heat. Facts, he said. Here's a fact. You were just a waitress. And just a student. We are not impressed by sugar water and night shifts. Everyone has a sob story. Do you understand the weight of this table? Serena could feel the old reflex rise, apologize, shrink, leave the room small enough that no one noticed. She let it pass through her like a bad smell. I understand blood doesn't care about a job title, she said evenly. I understand pain looks the same in Spanish and English. I understand a bullet tears muscle in a straight line and loyalty tears it in circles. I understand the weight of a table when a body is carried across it. And I understand that I'm only useful if I'm calm. So I am. Across the table, a slow nod from La Madrina. Ibarra's smile became real for the first time. It didn't reach his eyes, but it was there. Sosa glanced at Alejandro, found nothing to hold on to, and looked away. Alejandro still hadn't spoken. He didn't need to. His presence said enough. But when the staff refilled glasses and cleared plates for the next course, he set his hand briefly on the table between them, fingers relaxed, the vein at his wrist soft. It was nothing. It was everything. A signal anyone could miss. A line drawn where only people at the head of the table could see it. The dinner moved. Deals were referenced without names. Territories were described without maps. Money was never mentioned and counted all the same. Serena didn't pretend to understand every code, but she listened the way she listened to a patient's breathing. For change. For strain. For the sound of something about to break. At one point, Ibarra asked her about the clinic in Houston. She told him the truth she was allowed to tell. Equipment, protocols, outcomes. He nodded as if those were currencies he respected. La Madrina asked what she would do if two men came to her with one dose and both would die without it. Serena said, I would decide. Then I would live with it. La Madrina held her gaze a second longer than polite and then looked away, satisfied or warned. Serena couldn't tell. Dessert arrived as a formality. Small squares of something sweet beside sliced mango and a white cheese that broke like chalk. People ate without tasting. The business had been done. The ritual completed. The string lights hummed. When it ended, the chairs scraped in a chorus. Guards peeled away from shadows. The leaders said their soft goodnights in drifting clusters. Ibarra paused by Serena's chair. You were composed, he said. Rare in a room like this. Composure is cheaper than panic, she said. He almost laughed. Almost. We will see, he murmured and left. La Madrina reached across the table and touched Serena's wrist with 2 fingers, light as a blessing. You defended yourself without begging, she said. Remember that tone. Use it more. Use it less. You'll learn which. Sosa didn't speak to her when he left. He didn't need to. His silence had edges. The courtyard emptied. The staff cleared. The string lights buzzed like bees in a painted sky. Alejandro sat with Serena in the new quiet for a dozen heartbeats, the night carrying the smell of wet stone and cut grass. Why didn't you stop him? Serena asked at last, not looking at him. When he called me a waitress like I was dirt. Because if I had, they would have decided you needed protection, Alejandro said. Then they would never respect you. Protection is a tax you pay every day. She turned to him. You wanted me to prove something. I wanted you to know you could, he said. There is a difference. They stood. He walked her back through the cool hall, past the quiet paintings and the camouflaged cameras, past the wide glass that reflected their shapes like a rumor. At her door, he paused, his hand on the frame, his voice low enough that it belonged only to the two of them. Listen to me, he said. Every word you speak now makes allies, or enemies. He didn't wait for her answer. He stepped back into the hall and was gone, leaving Serena alone with the dark and the echo of a table that weighed everything she said. The next morning, Serena followed Alejandro down a hall she hadn't seen before. The door was steel, a keypad glowing faintly in the dim light. 2 guards stood motionless, eyes forward. Alejandro entered a code without looking at the keys, and the door unlocked with a heavy click. Come, he said. The air changed as soon as they stepped inside. It was cooler, sharper. The walls were white, but not the clean white of a hospital. It was the white of a place scrubbed too often, the paint fighting against what it had seen. The hallway sloped downward. Serena's sneakers squeaked against polished tile. At the end, another door opened, and the smell hit her. Blood. Sweat. Antiseptic. The clinic was underground. Rows of beds lined the walls. Some had curtains drawn, others didn't. On them lay men with bullet wounds, knife wounds, burns. Some were sedated, others groaned in low voices. One man's arm was bound with a belt, the skin around it blackened. A boy, he couldn't have been more than 12, lay with his leg in traction, his face pale with fever. Serena froze. My God! Alejandro's expression didn't change. He moved forward, hands behind his back, surveying the room like a general inspecting troops. This, he said, is what loyalty looks like after the fight. Serena shook her head. These aren't just soldiers. That boy, he's a child. Alejandro glanced at the bed, then back at her. He is the son of a loyal man. A bullet doesn't ask for age. Serena felt bile rise in her throat. She forced it down. Nurses moved briskly between the beds. Some wore simple scrubs, others street clothes. None of them looked surprised. None of them looked up. This is hell, Serena whispered. Alejandro stopped walking. He turned to face her fully, his dark eyes steady. Hell is reality with the lights left on. These people bleed for me. They bleed for the cartel. And they will not go to hospitals, because hospitals have questions. You will not ask questions. You will keep them alive. Serena's hands clenched at her sides. Do you hear yourself? You've dragged me into this. You've made me part of this machine. Do you think I wanted to end up in a place like this? You think you're here by accident? His voice sharpened. No. You proved yourself. You returned what was not yours. You did not speak when you could have. You saved Javier when others would have frozen. Every step was a choice. Yours. Not mine. She stepped closer, her voice trembling with anger. I chose to return a wallet. That's it. I didn't choose to be chained to your world, Alejandro. I didn't choose to stitch up children caught in your crossfire. You say this is loyalty. No. This is cruelty dressed as honor. For the first time, something flickered in his gaze. A spark, not of rage, but of recognition. He studied her face, as if weighing whether to crush or to keep. Then he leaned in, his voice low enough for her alone. You see cruelty, he said. I see survival. You see victims. I see soldiers, families, leverage. This is not heaven, Serena. Heaven is for the dead. Hell keeps us alive. Serena's throat tightened. Around them, a man groaned as a nurse tightened his bandage. A child whimpered softly in fevered sleep. The sound of it all pressed against her chest until she could barely breathe. She whispered, You're dragging me deeper than I can go. Alejandro stepped closer, his shadow long against the wall. His voice was calm, final. You already went deeper the day you answered my call. And you will go deeper still. He lifted her chin with a single finger, making sure she looked him in the eye. Hell keeps us alive, he repeated, quiet and unyielding. And now you keep me alive. The words settled on her like iron. And for the first time, Serena understood that her skill wasn't just survival. It was the leash that bound her to him. The compound in Mexico City pulsed with its own rhythm. Guards switching posts, the distant hum of engines, the shuffle of men moving in silence. To Serena, it felt less like a fortress and more like a cage lined with gold. Every corridor had eyes. Every gesture, every glance, carried weight. She had been trying to hold herself together, clinging to the fragments of who she had been before Galveston. A waitress. A student. A woman who believed her choices were her own. But now, her days were carved by Alejandro's presence, his shadow reaching into every moment. That evening, the air was unusually tense. She noticed it first at dinner, hushed voices, the sharp clink of glasses, men avoiding eye contact. Something was wrong. Later, when the guests had left, Serena wandered through the quiet hallways. She stopped when she overheard muffled words drifting from a side room, voices low but urgent. The shipment goes out tomorrow. If Alejandro doesn't see it, the rivals will. Her pulse spiked. She edged closer, pressing herself against the cold wall. The voice was familiar. Hector, one of Alejandro's lieutenants. A man Serena had seen sitting at his right hand, trusted with logistics and strategy. Now his words dripped treachery. Yes, I'll leave the gate unguarded. But I want out after this. No more. Serena's stomach turned. Her hands trembled against the plaster. She should leave, pretend she had heard nothing. But the whisper of Alejandro's warnings echoed in her memory. Every word you speak now makes allies, or enemies. She could stay silent. Let the betrayal unravel Alejandro's empire. Perhaps it would free her. Perhaps the cage would collapse. But in that same thought came another vision. Chaos, blood in the streets, innocent lives tangled in the fallout. And if Alejandro fell, what would happen to her? She was not naive enough to believe freedom was waiting outside these walls. She backed away, heart pounding, and hurried to her room. For hours she sat at the edge of her bed, her mind a battlefield. Do nothing. Live with the guilt. Speak, and tie herself forever to Alejandro's reign. When dawn came, her choice was made. She found him in his office, a cavernous room where sunlight spilled through barred windows. Alejandro was bent over maps and ledgers, his shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, the tattoos on his forearms stark against his skin. He looked up, eyes narrowing. You've been awake all night. Yes, she whispered. Why? Serena forced herself forward, her throat dry. Because someone close to you is betraying you. Hector. I heard him. He's giving your rivals access to the next shipment. For a heartbeat. Silence. Alejandro's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. You're certain? His voice was calm, too calm. Yes. He moved then, swift and precise, reaching for the gun on his desk. Come. Her stomach lurched. She hadn't expected it to unfold this fast, this brutal. But there was no retreat. She followed him through the compound, each step heavier than the last. They found Hector near the loading bay, barking orders at guards. He turned, his smile easy, until he saw Alejandro's weapon trained on him. Boss. Alejandro didn't let him finish. With a sharp gesture, the guards restrained Hector, forcing him to his knees. Serena's breath caught in her chest. She wanted to close her eyes, but couldn't. Alejandro crouched before the man. You sat at my table. You drank my wine. And you sold me to my enemies. Hector shook his head frantically. It's not true. She lies. His eyes darted to Serena, full of venom. This girl, she's turning you against us. She's poison. Alejandro's gaze flicked to her, then back to Hector. The difference, he said coldly, is that she had nothing to gain. You had everything. And with that, he pulled the trigger. The shot echoed like thunder, reverberating through Serena's bones. Hector collapsed, a dark pool spreading across the concrete. The guards didn't flinch. No one spoke. Serena's knees weakened. She had seen blood before, in the clinic, in the warehouse. But this was different. This was her choice made flesh. Alejandro rose, his steps deliberate as he crossed to her. He took her chin in his hand, lifting her face until their eyes locked. You warned me, he murmured. His voice was soft, but it carried the weight of a verdict. You chose me. I didn't, her words faltered. There is no going back. His grip tightened on her jaw, then released. The guards dragged Hector's body away. The sound of it scraping against the floor followed Serena long after. That night, she sat alone, staring at her trembling hands. She had wanted to believe she was still her own person, that she could make choices apart from him. But Alejandro was right. By speaking, she had chosen. And choices in his world were binding. Through the barred window, the city glimmered, vast, indifferent. Somewhere in that sprawl, life went on untouched by cartels and blood and impossible bargains. But for Serena, the path had narrowed to a single line, one that curved around Alejandro's will. Her tears came soundless, swallowed by the hum of the compound. In the dark, his words lingered like a curse. There is no going back. The night was heavy with the scent of cigars and gasoline. From the balcony of the compound, Mexico City stretched out below, a city of lights and shadows where life and death danced in close rhythm. Serena stood in a silk dress Alejandro had chosen for her, one that clung a little too close to her frame, as though even fabric now whispered possession. She was no longer the waitress who once juggled trays and tips. Every glance, every gesture marked her as someone caught in a net spun by power. Alejandro appeared at her side, silent as ever. His presence was a storm in disguise. Calm surface, violent depths. In his hand, a small velvet box. He did not open it at once. Instead, he studied her face as though weighing if she was ready for what came next. "Do you know what it means," he said, voice low, "to belong to me?" Serena did not look away. Protection, power, danger. A cage dressed as a gift. A smile flickered, brief and dangerous. He opened the box. Inside lay a ring, heavy gold, engraved with 2 words, Lealtad y Silencio. Loyalty and silence. The letters caught the dim light, glinting like a warning. Serena's chest tightened. For one irrational heartbeat she thought it was a marriage proposal, but Alejandro shook his head, as if reading the thought. "This is not marriage. Not yet," he said. "This is a vow. You wear this, and you are not my mistress. Not my plaything. You are my partner. You will stand at my side. But there is no walking away. Not alive." The words hit her like a weight pressing against her ribs. It was not love he offered. It was permanence, a binding oath stronger than any wedding band. Serena took the ring, feeling the weight of it in her palm. Her reflection trembled faintly in the polished surface. She thought of the clinic downstairs, of bloodied children and broken men she had stitched together. She thought of the cartel dinner, of the laughter when they mocked her as just a waitress. Every step since she had entered this world had been one more knot tightening around her freedom. And yet, she also thought of Alejandro's hand steadying her when the room threatened to swallow her whole. His strange way of listening when she spoke. His admission that she kept him alive. This was not a simple man. This was a fire she could either learn to contain, or be consumed by. Her voice was calm when she spoke, though her heart raced. "I'll take it. But on my terms." Alejandro's eyes sharpened. "Terms?" "Yes." She slipped the ring onto her finger, the gold cold against her skin. "If I wear this, if I stand at your side, then I do it as myself. As a healer. Anyone who needs me, man, woman, child, soldier, rival, I treat them. No questions. No exceptions." The silence stretched, long and dangerous. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Alejandro stepped closer, the night city glowing faintly behind him. His face was unreadable. "You ask me," he said softly, "to let you heal my enemies." "I ask you," she countered, "to let me remain human. If I become like the rest of them, what use am I to you? To anyone?" For the first time, Alejandro's composure faltered. His jaw tightened, his gaze searching her face as if she were a puzzle he had not solved. Then, slowly, he nodded. "You bend me," he whispered, almost to himself. "No one bends me. Not my men. Not my rivals. But you." His hand rose, brushing her cheek with a touch as dangerous as a blade. "Very well. You keep your vow. Heal whom you must. But remember this, each life you save creates a debt. And debts in my world are always collected." Serena held his gaze, her fear and defiance locked together in a fragile truce. "Then we'll pay them together." Alejandro's lips curved into a shadow of a smile. He pressed his forehead briefly against hers, an intimacy more dangerous than any kiss. In that moment, Serena understood. Respect, fear, and something like love had fused between them into something sharper, something that could either bind them forever, or destroy them both. When he pulled back, his voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "From tonight forward, you are marked. Not as my prisoner. Not even as my lover. But as mine. The ring will speak for you. It will protect you. And it will condemn you." She looked at the city again, the streets alive with laughter and sirens, music and gunfire. Somewhere in the sprawl, her old life still existed. College notes, morning coffee, the waitress who dreamed of something more. But that girl was gone. The woman who stood here wore a ring inscribed with silence. Her silence. Her loyalty. Her choice. Serena slipped her hand into Alejandro's, their fingers intertwining. For the first time, she did not feel like she was falling. She felt like she was walking willingly into the fire. And fire, once chosen, burns brighter than fear. The night split open with gunfire. Serena woke to the roar of engines outside the compound walls, followed by the metallic rattle of AK-47s. The windows trembled, glass humming with violence. Shouts in Spanish filled the courtyard below. By the time she pulled on her robe and rushed to the door, she could already smell the acrid tang of smoke creeping down the corridor. The compound was under siege. 2 guards sprinted past her, rifles slung over their shoulders, one of them bleeding from a cut across his temple. Serena's heart slammed in her chest as she pressed against the wall. This wasn't the cartel dinner. This wasn't the clinic. This was war. Then came the sound that froze her blood. Alejandro's voice, sharp with command, cut short by the brutal crack of gunfire. A scream followed. She didn't remember moving her feet, only that she was suddenly running, down the stairs, through smoke and chaos, until she reached the main hall. Alejandro was on the floor. Blood pooled beneath him, dark and too fast. A guard knelt by his side, fumbling uselessly with a cloth. Serena shoved him away. "Move!" she shouted, dropping to her knees. Her hands pressed against Alejandro's chest, feeling the slick warmth of his blood spreading between her fingers. A gunshot wound, high, near the shoulder, but deep enough to kill if she didn't act. His lips were pale, his eyes half shut, but he was alive. "Get me a table," she barked. "Now! And bring light, everything you can find. Do it!" Men who had laughed at her days ago now obeyed without hesitation, dragging a wooden table into the center of the hall, flooding the room with lanterns and flashlights. Serena climbed onto the table, her knees shaking, but her voice steady. "We can't wait for a doctor," one of the lieutenants muttered. "She is the doctor," another answered. Serena cut away Alejandro's shirt, the gold chain around his neck glinting faintly in the light. The wound was messy, but not impossible. She had stitched farmers torn open by machinery, children ripped apart by stray bullets. But this was Alejandro, the man who had dragged her into this nightmare and somehow, against all reason, become the center of it. Her hands trembled for only a second before she forced them still. Fear had no place here. Only skill. Scissors. Needle. Thread. Alcohol. "Now!" she ordered. The men scrambled. Someone brought a bottle of mezcal, another ripped open sheets for bandages. She sterilized what she could, whispering under her breath, not a prayer, but a plea to her own hands to hold steady. Alejandro groaned as she pressed the cloth deep into the wound. His eyes fluttered open, catching hers. Even bleeding, he tried to smirk. "You, still here." "Shut up," Serena snapped, though her throat was thick. "Save your strength." The bullet had torn muscle, but she couldn't feel bone fragments. Luck or fate, or something darker had spared him. Still, every second counted. She worked quickly, stitching layer by layer, her breath measured, her hands guided by years of practice, and by desperation. If she failed, she would not just lose him. She would lose herself. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The compound raged outside, guards exchanging fire with attackers, but Serena was locked in a silence of blood and breath. Her fingers ached, her eyes burned, but stitch by stitch she pulled him back from the edge. Finally, the bleeding slowed. She tied the last knot, pressed fresh cloth against the wound, and leaned back, chest heaving. Alejandro's pulse throbbed weakly beneath her fingers. Alive! She had done it! When the gunfire outside faded into silence, when the attackers finally withdrew, the hall reeked of smoke and blood. Guards whispered prayers. Others stared at Serena, their faces marked with something new. Not suspicion, not mockery, but awe. Hours later, in the dim quiet of his recovery room, Alejandro stirred. Serena sat at his bedside, exhaustion weighing on her bones. His voice was faint, but laced with the same iron she had always known. "The wallet," he whispered. She frowned. "What?" "The night we met. When you called me to return it." His lips curled into the shadow of a smile. It was never the test. Her breath caught. You were, he continued. From the moment you picked it up, I wanted to know if you would run, or if you would face me. Every moment since, every choice, you've proven it. Tonight, you saved me. And now you are mine, Serena. Not as a prisoner, as the one who chose to stay. Tears pricked her eyes, though she refused to let them fall. She thought of her old life, classrooms, books, the smell of coffee on her uniform. It seemed impossibly far away. She was no longer that girl. I didn't save you for you, she said softly. I saved you because I had to prove to myself that I could. That even here, even in this world, I am still me. Alejandro's hand, weak but steady, reached for hers. And that, he murmured, is why you belong here. Serena looked down at the ring still gleaming on her finger. Lealtad y silencio. Loyalty and silence. She had thought it a cage. Now it felt like both shackle and shield, inescapable, yet hers to wear. At dawn, she stepped onto the balcony overlooking the scarred compound. The city stretched beyond, endless and indifferent. Smoke still drifted in the air, the faint smell of gunpowder clinging to the morning breeze. She touched the railing, her hand stained faintly with blood that would not wash off easily. The waitress was gone. In her place stood a woman who had carved survival out of fire, who had chosen a path that could never lead back. Trapped, yes, but stronger than she had ever been. Serena lifted her chin, the ring glinting against the rising sun. Somewhere behind her, Alejandro breathed, alive because of her hands. And in front of her, the world waited, not with freedom, but with power. For the first time, she did not flinch. And that's where Serena's story leaves us. No longer the waitress who stumbled on a lost wallet, but a woman bound to power, silence, and survival. She stood on that balcony with the sun rising, no longer afraid, yet knowing freedom would never be hers again. So what do you think? Was Serena's choice strength or surrender? Did she win, or lose herself in the process? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, and share this video. And don't forget, every decision has a price. Stay tuned for more stories. Until next time.